Hello, everyone. Go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. I am Zach Lawhorn from Show Me Opportunity, and I am pleased to welcome you all today to the program from the Show Me Institute. For those of you who don't know about the Show Me Institute, we are an independent research and education organization with a focus on free market fiscal and education policies for Missouri. You can learn all about us at showmeinstitute.org. Follow us on Facebook at Facebook/ShowMeInstitute, and follow us on Twitter at ShowMe. We want to make today as interactive as possible, so please submit your questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Show Me Institute's Director of Research and Education Policy, Dr. Susan Pendergrass. Before joining Show Me Institute, Susan was Vice President of Research and Evaluation for the National Alliance of Public Charter Schools, where she oversaw data collection and analysis. Prior to coming to the Alliance, Susan was a senior policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Education during the Bush administration and a senior research scientist at the National Center for Education Statistics during the Obama administration. Last year, Show Me Opportunity and Show Me Institute launched the Missouri School Rankings Project and MoSchoolRankings.org. The mission of the project is to make student performance data transparent for all Missourians. And here to tell you all about the project and MoSchoolRankings.org is Dr. Susan Pendergrass. Susan?
Thanks, Zach. First of all, sorry about the change of venue. We have had some weather glitches here in St. Louis. I also hope that my internet connection stays stable throughout this. So hopefully everything's going to work great. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so we can talk a little bit about what's going on in Missouri with school accountability, which is a very important topic. And I know, especially this year, parents and citizens care a lot about school accountability and how our schools are doing. I think we mostly understand that schools have suffered in the last few years and that kids have lost learning time and schools have been closed or trying to deal with virtual learning, and that's had an impact as well. But even before all of that, at the Show Me Institute, we've been talking about school accountability. And by that, I mean, we expect schools to teach kids minimally how to read and do math. And is that happening? And if it is or isn't happening, how can we find out? So what we did at the Show Me Institute is launched a project really to help parents mostly better understand how schools are doing across the state. Theoretically, the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or DESE, is required by federal law in exchange for taking federal funds to create and distribute school report cards and district report cards. And they're supposed to be designed with parent input, and they're supposed to be very easy to find and very easy to understand. And really importantly, they're supposed to include meaningful differentiation between schools and districts. In other words, you should be able to look at a school report card and know whether a school is doing better than its neighborhood school or worse than its neighborhood school, better than its district or the state average or worse than the state average. And you should really be able to differentiate between where are the stronger performing schools in the state and where are the lower performing schools in the state. And while DESE has produced report cards for schools and districts, initially we've done some events around the fact that they had these tables that were very hard to understand. They now have a website that has graphs about schools, but they're still hard to understand and there's still no context and there still is no definitive measure on each school or district. People understand letter grades. We know an F from an A, and none of that yet exists from DESE. So the Show Me Institute took it upon ourselves. We created a website. As Zach mentioned, it's called MoSchoolRankings.org. This is what it looks like on the homepage when you go there. And we were very purposeful about the way we created this website, and we really wanted people to understand how schools are doing. So we wanted it to have very clear, we wanted to have grades for schools and districts. We wanted the way those grades were calculated to be very, very clear. We wanted you to easily be able to find a school or a district, either through a map search or a list search. We even have a map of legislative districts to help you find schools. And we wanted you to be able to compare between schools and districts. And so this is what we end up with is, We have a school district search, a school search, we have a map search or list search. And these bubbles just basically are because there's too many schools to show up as a pin. So as you can zoom in and zoom out to find a school. And over on the right-hand side, it has a list of schools. And if you want to look at the detail for a particular school, you just hit detail. And we included some things to help people better understand what's going on in school accountability. And one thing that we thought was very important was a glossary. DESE does have report cards, as I mentioned, but the wording in the report cards is often hard to understand. I think it's hard to know what does accredited mean? What's proficiency? How do we calculate a graduation rate? And what does that mean? So on our website, we have a glossary, and we spent some time trying to make the definitions of the terms very understandable. And in addition, we put in links so you could find out more about graduation rates if you're interested. We also did create grades. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but we wanted it to be very clear. You know, every year DESE publishes or creates and sort of publishes a list of the bottom 5% of schools in the state, both the bottom 5% of all schools and the bottom 5% of schools who serve low-income kids. And they're called targeted and comprehensive. And finding the list is hard, but understanding why a school is on that list is very, very hard. And some states have a clear definition, a clear explanation of the calculation, because if you find out that your child's school is on that list, you'd want to know why. So we wanted it to be very easy to find how we did the grades. And if someone disagrees and thinks there's a better way of doing it, we're open to that conversation. But we tried to make it at least very easy to find so that folks can understand how we created what we created. And also on the page is at the top a link to the sources. So all of the data that we used for this website is already publicly available. We simply downloaded data from DESE and in some cases from the federal government. And for each school or district, I just merged them all into one large data set. But when you see those variables on our website, I wanted to make sure that you could find them. So for each of the data points, when you click on sources, we have a link to the source file on the DESE website, just to make perfectly clear where we got the data from so that you can check the number. And I've had a couple of superintendents reach out and dispute a number, and I was able to lead them straight to the source file so that they could confirm that that's what DESE has for their number. Like, I didn't make any of this up. So I wanted that to be very clear. And also, you can download the full data set. There's a full data set for all the schools on the website and another data set for all the districts on the website. And all of the data are in one place, which is something that DESE also does not do. So what does it look like? Basically, if you click on a school like South Elementary, which is in Jefferson City, you're going to see a map at the top of the page, sort of pointing out where it is. You're also going to see some information about the school in terms of the address, the website, how many students it serves, the grade level, whether it's in a city, rural, suburban, or town. That's federal information. The school is on the targeted list for improvement, and some demographic information, some teacher information, and some expenditure information. We also included the legislative district and the legislator for where that school is physically located. Now, I know that legislative districts and school districts overlap all over the place. And when you look at like DESE's version of which district is responsible for this school, it'll have multiples because it'll look at where the school district is. We took the actual longitude and latitude of that school and physically placed it into a legislative district. At the top, we have a ranking of the 2,040 schools in the state that are on our website. This school is 342. And in a minute, I'm going to show you the grades for this school. And when you average all those grades together, this school got a 2.5 out of 4.0. So then when you dig in a little bit on that page, you'll see that for each school or district, we assigned 10 letter grades. 8 of those are based on reading and math scores, because we believe that that is what is really important when it comes to school performance, or the most basic level of importance. And other things come after that, but these are the things that we really need schools to be getting right. So mostly reading and math, and then for high schools, 4-year graduation rates and ACT scores. And so the way the grades work out is we looked at the grade level or the proficiency of all students in English language arts and all students in math. That's these top two. The proficiency of low-income students specifically in English and in math. The growth score that DESE calculates for each school and district in English and in math. And then there's an adjusted score. And what that is we modeled all the proficiency levels in the state of all the schools against the percentage of low-income students enrolled. And we then use that to predict what their proficiency for all students should be. And we compared that to what it actually was. So that gives an idea of how well that school is doing based on their one aspect of their demographics. And then next to the school is the district's score for the same thing, and then the state value for the same thing. And then for each of the grades, you get a grade, a rank, like we talked about before, and the actual value for that measure. And the rank, just to sort of make clear how we did the rank, we simply put them in order from top to bottom, highest performing to lowest performing. But in some cases, two schools would have the same value. For example, if 46.3% of their students were proficient in math, they would have the same value. So in the case where two schools had the same exact value, they have the same rank. Just want to make that clear. And then the grades were calculated by taking, for each indicator, let's say, for example, graduation rates, what was the range of points? And I should mention all of these data are from 2018, 2019 school year. And I took that range, like for graduation rates, it was 30 points, and just divided it into 5 equal sections, and then assigned letter grades based on which of those sections a school was in. And that's a very normal approach. It's a straight curve of the grades. And what happens is most of the grades end up being, I'm going to skip ahead, C's. And so which is also very typical. So one thing that's been a little bit interesting about the launch of the website is that, those of us who are interested in education or just in general consider C to be a bad score, but it's just important to keep in mind a C is an average score. So if a school gets a C, it means they're just hitting the state average. A B or an A is above the state average, a D or an F is below the state average. I do want to skip back because this is on the website as well. Again, in the interest of transparency, for each of the grades, these are the school level grades, I wanted it to be very clear. For example, ACT scores, an A would be an average score of 23.6 to 26.2. And F is an average score of 13.4 to 15.9. I didn't want anyone to feel like they couldn't figure out what we did here, or that we were trying to do something, sneaky, because we're not trying to do anything sneaky. So I want to be very clear on how the grades were calculated. And then this is how they turned out. And then we took the grades for each school or district and simply combined them into a GPA, as you normally would if you think about high school and college. F's, you get no points, A's, you get 4 points, and it's just a GPA. Again, I have this with an asterisk in bold because the average GPA across the state of Missouri is a 2.0. So GPA higher than 2.0 is above average, below 2.0 is below average. So now that we have this website built, we launched it in October. Since it's been launched, we've had over 50,000 page views. We've had dozens, I would say, media mentions. I've had people who have reached out to me because they really like downloading the data. I've had people reach out to me, as I said, to discuss a particular number, to ask me if there's other ways they could aggregate the data. So there's a lot that can still be done with this website. And what we're doing is what I'm doing is using these data to do some analyses. I'm gonna highlight one in a minute, where we have already consolidated the performance data by legislative district. So we have one-pagers on each legislator in terms of what percentage of the students in their district are scoring below proficient, what the average ACT score for students in their district is. And also a next step for us is adding the 2020, 2021 data. We hope to have that update to the website available within the next month or so. The data have been released and we're in the process of putting it together into one data set, and we will be adding that as well. So one thing that I've been doing with this, just to give you an example, is downloading the data, looking at the grades assigned the way we assign them, and looking at a particular group of schools. In this case, I really wanted to know more about rural high schools. And so, for example, when you look at rural high schools, the low-income students who attend them, their proficiency or above in English language arts. I just find this to be interesting because compared to suburban schools, obviously lower percentages of schools got A's or B's, just 32% got A's or B's, and we have some C's and D's, and I'm sorry, D's and F's. And if you look at math in particular, you see that there are actually no A's, and the bulk of the schools got D's or F's. We have a report coming out very soon on rural high schools using these data and sort of discussing what I think is going on there, or what the data seem to suggest is going on there with rural high schools and math and science. And it really plays out through these grades. And then finally, ACT scores, looking at the grades, you can see most of the rural high schools are right in the middle. They got C's, but for suburban high schools, more than half got A's or B's. So there really is a difference between the high schools in our rural areas. And I will say most high schools are rural, 280. We have a lot of small rural high schools. But these schools do end up looking quite a bit different. And I would not be able to do this analysis without having first calculated the grades. So that's what we put together, and happy to take any questions about how we did it or how to use the site. And yeah, so like if you have any questions, just let me know.
All right, great. Thank you, Susan. So our first question is, the GPA approach will always result in 50% below average and 50% above. So isn't this an inappropriate measure for the goal?
So I don't know, not for my goal. My goal was to know how all schools compared to each other. And we do have a lot of the 2.0s. Yeah, we have a lot in the middle. And it's not so much like 2.0s, it's the midpoint, but we have a lot of them that are just in that C range. And to be fair, we are trying to differentiate between schools, and we're really looking for the D's and F's versus the A's and B's. And so when people first looked at this and were like, oh my gosh, a 2.5, that's a terrible GPA. I'm like, it's actually above average. I could have inflated it, but then that would have just been an inflated number. So I think the right way to go is to set everything on the center. Okay.
And you mentioned this at the beginning a little bit, but why is it important for there to be performance transparency? Like what's missing if we don't have performance transparency?
Well, in the words of many, many people, including George Bush, but you can't fix what you don't measure. And the way it works right now in Missouri is we are using an annual performance report that's part of the Missouri School Improvement Plan. And districts get labeled accredited, fully accredited, partially accredited, or unaccredited. We have 520 districts, and 514, give or take, are fully accredited. So we have 6 partially accredited. That's changing this year. That's like everyone got an A, so now we know nothing, right? And so it's really important to be able to distinguish between schools and districts. And then at the school level right now, under MSIP 5, schools just get a number between 0 and 100, which is the percentage of the possible points, and different schools have different possible points they earned, and you're looking for a 70. Well, that is not information for a parent to use, right? A parent wants to know if their child's school is doing well or doing poorly. And to be honest, parents probably have a sense of that, but they want to know how they compare. And states that have about 16 states use letter grades, other states use stars or colors or something. But states, for example, Florida has been using letter grades since the late 90s. And what they've seen is they've been able to generate continuous improvement by first getting to know what the schools are and not being afraid of that, and not being afraid of labeling a school as a low performer. And then secondly, being able to target resources to those schools. And then they continuously raise the bar. So they get too many A's and B's, the bar gets harder, because your A's and B schools will be like, well, we've got this figured out, we can sit back. But they raise the bar so that it gets harder. And what that does is it generates continuous improvement in the system. But the first step is to measure. And I feel like DESE has not been measuring.
have the last 2 years, the pandemic, did they have any impact on the current data set that's on the website? And if not, will they have any impact on the new data set that'll be on the website at some point?
Yeah, so the data on our website is 18-19. The school year 2019-20, they did not administer the tests. That's when the school shut down in March. And then in 2020, 2021, they administered the tests, but a lot of kids were learning virtually. They had to come to school to take the test on a computer. About 90% of students did do that, but that participation is very uneven. And the data have been released by DESE. It's on their school report cards if folks want to check it out. But it's very hard to compare between 2021 and 2019 because a lot changed. But what we know is not a big shock. Scores went down. And only about 32% of Missouri students scored proficient in math in 2020, 2021. And we see that on our website. But we had committed to this process, and I still feel very strongly that the last thing we want to do right now is take a more extended data vacation. Like, this is when we really need to be looking, because kids have fallen behind. And while maybe you don't want to line up the 2021 scores against 2019 scores, there is information to be had there, and we need to look at it even if it's uncomfortable to do so.
You said we're on MSIP 6. How do you deal with that, trying to collect data from tests that keep changing?
So we're technically on MSIP 5. MSIP 6 information has been released, but I'm not aware that they have yet decided on how many points for each thing and how the points get added up. But even under MSIP 5 and before, they did change the test 4 times in 5 years. 18-19 was the first year that you could compare to a prior year to 17-18. Now that's fallen apart. I don't know when we'll have comparable data again, could be 2024. And I know that DESE has been adamant that you should not compare one year to the other. But it's very hard to track. I will say, through all the changes in tests, we haven't really gotten above 50% for reading scores, or much above 45% for math scores. So that's been consistent. And there is a national assessment that's given every 2 years called the Nations Report Card. And so that allows us to track, and that's been given since the mid-90s. That allows us to track Missouri scores compared to other states and compared to Missouri earlier performance. That test doesn't change. And on that test, we've basically been flat, maybe some small increases, but while we've been flat, other states have been leapfrogging over us. So in the 90s, we started off our 4th graders in English and math at like 15th and 20th, and now we're at like 35th, 34th and 36th, I believe. So we've just been kind of holding our own, but we have not been a state that's made our standards harder. We've actually made them easier the last time. So it's hard to get information out of this, but what it does do is it does inform a parent about a particular school or a particular district.
So have you had any feedback specifically from policymakers since you've released the project?
Yeah, we've talked to some policymakers. They're behind it. There are a couple of bills going through the legislature right now. One would be a constitutional amendment that would require DESE to create school report cards with letter grades for schools and for districts. There's also a bill that would create a school accountability board. But what we know from state and national surveys is that parents are very, very interested in accountability right now. Like, they really want to know more than ever how their kids' schools are doing. So I think there's an opportunity for the legislature to step in and to really press this through the State Board of Education and ultimately through DESE to make sure MSIP 6 has real information and real teeth in it that can help locate the schools that need improvement and help them improve.
Great. And I want to remind everyone, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom. Somebody asked, is the number of students that took the test available at your website by district?
It's not available at our website by district. For I don't know if they're asking about 18-19 or not. For 18-19, yes, the number of students who took the test is available. For 2020, 2021, it's not available on our website yet, but it is available on the DESE website. And you can download, it's called the DISAG file at the building level, and it will show reportable test scores. There's an accountable column and a reportable column, and the reportable column is the number of students who took the test.
Gotcha. So what state has done this, or organization? Or I mean, I know there were other organizations that we looked at when building this website, but who's the leader in the clubhouse? What state is doing it well?
So, so the way it worked with the federal law, the Every Student Succeeds Act, is in the last version of that, which happened under the Trump administration, they put a lot of responsibility for how to do school accountability back on states. And they said, you can design your system with the caveat that you have to do these school report cards, school and district report cards. So the U.S. Department of Education did a hackathon on designing them, and they called out some high performers. Virginia was one, and I believe Oregon was one. And then there's a Foundation for Excellence in Education that also did a year-long project on designing school report cards. And they have lots of good information. It's Excel and Ed on their website about how to design a good report card. We've called out North Carolina and Oregon. Illinois actually has a really good one, a really good website with school report cards. And then Florida probably is the leader in letter grades. We did a virtual event a month or so ago with Patricia Levesque from Excel and Ed talking about their letter grades and how that so I just talked about what Missouri's done on the nation's report card. In that same time frame, Florida fourth graders were like 46th and 48th, I think, somewhere in the high 40s in the 90s. They're like fourth and sixth. It's like Florida has leapfrogged over most states, and now they're at the very top. And one of the things that they believe has really driven that is real school accountability, not one that doesn't make anyone feel bad, not one that doesn't make parents feel like their kids go to a good school, to a bad school, but real school accountability is what has given them the platform to improve so dramatically.
It does feel like we're in a wave of school accountability, a lot of momentum. Do you attribute that to the experience a lot of people had going virtual over the pandemic, or is there something else that's contributing to it?
I think the pandemic, when the school shut down and parents became their child's teacher and they sat down on the computer and went through the curriculum every day and saw what was exactly happening or not happening, I think that's really activated parents. And right now they are a pretty powerful group and they're pretty angry. But also, we all know that this last 2 years has been trying for many of us, if not most of us. And parents know that their kids have lost learning. Parents know that their kids didn't want to log on. And a lot of kids we've simply lost, like at least 10% of Missouri parents have their children not in the school system anymore. Parents did not start their kids in kindergarten or preschool. And so parents more than anyone know that their kids have lost ground. And kids who were in school in the last pandemic in 1918 didn't make up that ground on average over their lifetime. They had lower educational attainment, lower median earnings. This is a crisis. It's been 2 years. I think we are hopefully moving out of that mode and that the schools are open and the kids are in school. But we basically, kept the adults safe at the expense of kids. And it's been a real loss. And so I think parents want to know where they stand. Parents repeatedly say they want tutoring. Parents are paying for tutoring. They want to catch up. They want summer school. They want after school. They want to do whatever it takes for their kids to catch up because they don't want them to suffer lifelong consequences from this 2-year shutdown.
Somebody asked if you're planning to add data prior to 2018-19. And do you think it would be valuable to establish trends looking backwards?
I would love to, but we could only add 1 year, which would be 17-18. And I don't think that given the disruption of the last 2 years, that would give us a lot of information. We could have done a trend if this hadn't happened, if the pandemic hadn't happened. So from 17-18 to 18-19 with a year, we could have kept going, but now we can't. So we plan on updating it every year. And we plan on using the same letter grade cut scores, unfortunately, which means this year there's going to be a lot more lower grades. But I would love to see trend data, but it's just not it's going to be a while.
So just speaking in broad terms, because I don't want to put you on the spot here without the data in front of you, but if looking back 10 years from now, what do you think those trends would be in Missouri education?
I think so. I think a lot of districts did a great job at switching to virtual, and they're keeping it. They're keeping it for some students, or they're keeping it for some events like snow days and things like that. Like that has caused districts to get on board with that. There's also the Missouri Course Access Program, or MOCAP, which is the state virtual program, and a lot more kids have signed up for that. And those are accredited providers, and we have test score data from last year, and the MOCAP virtual students did much, much better than the district virtual students. So I think we're going to have a lot more flexibility in there, and it has forced districts to listen to parents more. And I think it's going to force districts to innovate more. I mean, we've got some great takeaways from this experience, and we need to take advantage of that. More parents are homeschooling. And when surveyed, parents now, or have been, I don't know if you asked them today, but they say that they'd like to have their kids home 1 or 2 days a week. Like, there were some parts of that parents liked, but not at the expense of learning. So yeah, I don't know. 10 years is a long time today, but I don't know.
And one of the things that we've heard after releasing this website is there's always the question of funding. They say, well, there's low ranked schools on your website that we need more money, throw more fun. So we're at this moment in the last 2 years now where Missouri is receiving hundreds of millions or billions of dollars specifically earmarked for education. So we're really kind of going to be able to run the experiment now. And how do you think it's going to go? We've got the money. How do you think it's going to be used? And do you think it's going to be effective?
So the CARES money has mostly been spent, and that was a weird one because that was a lot of money on cleaning and transportation, even when schools were shut down. And that money, districts should not be complaining about money right now. There is another $2 billion set to go out to districts if the governor gets the supplemental budget to his desk, and we don't know right now because the legislature is struggling with that. But money should not be the issue. Some districts got $20,000 per student in stimulus money, but I suspect that many districts don't know how to spend that money, or they're concerned that if they spend it incorrectly, they'll have to give it back. Nationally, know that a lot of districts have spent it on facilities, on hiring. The Show Me Institute put out a document on how we think that stimulus money should be spent, and a lot of districts have not adhered to those rules or conditions, but money is not the issue now. Now, I do know that superintendents are already talking about a fiscal cliff for when the stimulus money goes away and they just go back to the money they had before. But that's how these work. So there's a big bump in the money right now, and then it's going to go back to the way it was before. So if districts hired staff and then they're going to have to keep paying for them, or if they invest in facilities that they have to keep paying for, then that's going to be problematic. But yeah, money should not be the issue.
Someone asked if the MOCAP data set is included on the website. And if it's not, what do we know about performance from students who choose to enter MOCAP?
So the MOCAP data are not on this website. The first I've seen of MOCAP data was presented at a school board meeting in, I think in December. There's a PowerPoint in the meeting minutes, and I have it. And if anybody emails me directly at susan.pendergrass@showmeinstitute.org, I can send it. But it does compare MOCAP virtual students to district virtual students. And what we know is that I think in all cases, 3rd to 5th, 6th to 8th, 9 to 12, across subjects, the MOCAP students outperformed the district virtual.
Going forward, how important is connectivity, meaning internet access, for schools in rural areas?
Well, I mean, I think that's a huge lesson learned, right? So when the schools shut down, many of our rural schools were in no way prepared. And the beginning, when we started looking at it in, April 2020, districts were printing off homework packets and asking parents to come pick them up, but then drop them off when they were done. They were not prepared for this. And now I think, again, stimulus money is available. I think we've realized the importance of every student having a device and having internet access. If that's a hotspot, if that's cellular, there's lots of ways to get there. There is broadband, but there's other ways to get there. But the importance of every student having a device and connectivity. As I said, we could be doing schooling virtually at different times. We can do it at different hours of the day, different days of the week. If we get better at this, then we don't have to have snow days. So I do think that the importance of making sure every student can connect has, districts that were like, we don't need that internet. They did, and they do.
Just last week, a school district near Columbia, Hallsville, their school board approved moving to a 4-day week. Is that something that we've seen an uptick in? And do you think that that's a trend that's here to stay?
So we had seen an uptick in that before the pandemic, and I haven't tracked it since the pandemic. It seems kind of strange because anyway, But yeah, I do think it's a trend. And to me, it's a little bit of a troubling trend. It's a cost saver so that on that 5th day, you don't pay for utilities or buses or that type of thing. I don't think you get the same benefit in adding an hour to the end of the day as you do having students there every day. And now obviously parents who work, then they have to come up with something else to do on that day. So it's not very convenient for families. But I have not yet looked at the data for the districts that have gone to 4-day weeks. That would be entirely possible using this data set, and I think it would be interesting.
So we're in the middle of the legislative session here. We're a little over a month in. You mentioned some of the bills that are moving through the legislature, but other than that, what's going on in terms of education in Jefferson City? Has it been pretty active? Is there a lot of stuff you're keeping tabs on?
Yeah, it has been active. I do think legislators get it that parents are mad. Parents have gotten mad in general about the lack of education when schools shut down. Parents have been mad about schools not reopening. Parents have been mad about masks, about vaccines, about curriculum. Just generally speaking, I do think that the legislators seem to be getting it that every family in Missouri should have more than one option. It's like harder to understand that when you move to a neighborhood and you bought a house in a district you like, and you don't really see why every family needs to have another option. But then your school closes, or your school requires masks, or your school has social study curriculum you don't like. You're like, oh yeah, now I kind of get it. I do think every school, every family should have at least one more option. And every family does have an option in MOCAP. But one bill that's moving through the legislature is HB 1814, and it would give every student it would open up school districts in Missouri to open enrollment. So students from one district could attend a school in a different district. There's some limitations. A district has to agree to accept students. But in our rural areas in particular, in states that have this in rural areas, or states that have this, it is normally rural areas where the uptake is the highest. And that could be because a high school in a neighboring district is closer to your house. It could be because they offer a program that your high school doesn't offer. Like those scores I just showed for our rural high schools, it's hard for a high school of 100 students to be everything to everyone. It's that many of them do not offer calculus or physics. They don't offer AP. They don't offer foreign language beyond Spanish. So an open enrollment plan would give rural areas the opportunity to collaborate and let high school students cross district lines, and let high schools differentiate themselves and maybe be a STEM high school, or be an ag high school, or performing arts high school. That happens in other states, and that happens in Texas, Ohio, Michigan. So I hope that the open enrollment goes through. And then charter school funding equity, I think, is something that I hope that's been considered for 3 years. I hope that happens this year. And parents' bills of rights, there's several of those moving, and I would expect one of them, I hope, to get to the governor's desk so that we can at least solidify what are the rights of parents.
And we have our own version of the Parents' Bill of Rights up at showmeinstitute.org.
Right.
So is there a distinction between open, or what is the distinction between open enrollment and interdistrict choice? Because I've heard both those words thrown around during the session.
Interchangeable. They're interchangeable terms. So there's inter-district choice, which means you can go between districts. There's intra-district choice, which means you can go to any school within a district. But open enrollment is, in this bill anyway, would be crossing district lines. And again, a lot of people are like, rural areas don't need it, but that's the area that you really see uptake in these programs.
And I mean, I know we're the show me state, so we like to see things demonstrated for us, but how novel is this idea that your school isn't dependent on your zip code? Is it still the majority of states where that's the case, or is this becoming more and more out of date and more states are moving to open enrollment?
43 states have some version of open enrollment, whether it's intra-district or inter-district. More and more states are moving towards a model where when you have a child starting kindergarten, you decide what school they're going to go to. I mean, charter schools are in 43 states, and we're getting to more states have a critical mass of charter school students. Texas has 700 charter schools. California has 1,200. I mean, they're getting to be a lot less novel. They've been around almost for 30 years. So the idea that you would have to buy a house to get a school you want is fading. The U.S. Department of Education does a National Household Education Survey every few years, and the percentage of parents even in their assigned public school, the chosen versus assigned, the percentage of parents in the assigned public school is down to the high 60% now. So like a third of parents are either in a chosen public school, private school, homeschool. I just think we're seeing a lot more variety. And it probably 15 years ago, that was in the high 80s. So fewer parents are at their assigned public school. And I think the pandemic is going to change that even more, just because I know I talked to people in very expensive school districts who were very unhappy with their school, and they had bought a house in that district, let alone parents in some of the most struggling districts. Our urban districts, St. Louis and Kansas City, were some of the last to go back in person. And those are the ones with so many parents had to go to work. So just a lot of discontent this time. And I think that now we're going to see more parents sort of getting it. Like, one choice is not okay if the choice doesn't work for you.
Have you heard from either a parent or maybe a teacher or principal that was surprised where they ranked on the website, either pleasantly or otherwise?
One district reached out because they were ranked highest. They wanted to let folks know, but no, the one superintendent who thought the graduation rate was wrong, and I confirmed that it wasn't wrong from my point of view. That's what DESE had to lead him to reach out to DESE, and but I've had some other legislators like add up their stuff and say, is this right? Is this what I'm seeing? Like, this is a first for legislators to be able to see all the schools in their district. So yeah, I mean, I know it's tough. Again, we got to get our heads around this 2.0 and the C being average, but you know, what my hope is that we update this every year and people get used to going to mostschoolrankings.org to see how schools are doing, or how they're doing compared to last year. And then it becomes part of the conversation. Right now, the real estate websites and whatnot use Great Schools, which is a national organization and gives every school a score from 1 to 10. Ours is much more detailed, and it's much more based on just Missouri schools and districts. So I hope that people get just really comfortable with using this as a resource.
Great. All right, I'm going to do a call for last questions. So if you have a question, just send it in. We're just going to do a couple more minutes here. So I don't know, you sound like you're kind of optimistic, right? Like, do you have a good feeling that by the end of May, we'll have made some strides in Jefferson City and the legislature, or what are your thoughts?
Well, we got some hurdles. There's been some distractions in the last few weeks. We got to get past some of the distractions. It's great when education committees pass bills out of committee and they send them off to rules committee or to the full floor. But until it gets to the governor's desk, it's not a law. So we really need to see these things go all the way through, like the education scholarship account did last year, and or 2 years ago, get to the governor's desk so that parents can start taking advantage of the program. That happened with MOCAP a few years ago. I have had several parents reach out to me to say, how can I be part of these programs? And parents want it. And, so most of the charter schools have waiting lists. Parents want school choice. So I just really hope the legislature sees these all the way through both houses and gets to the governor's desk.
Okay. And last question, any response from DESI from the website?
No, not one, which I find a little surprising. I've heard that it's harder to reach the website on a state issued computer. You might have to use a certain browser, but not one at all. So we'll see. I don't know if it's purposeful or they're just very busy, but they have not commented.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Susan. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, the website is mostschoolrankings.org. There's a link right on the top of the page of showmeinstitute.org. So please go there, check it out. We have another education virtual event on March 9th with Jason Bedrick and Mike McShane from EdChoice. It's about busting myths in the school choice movement. So we hope that you will join us then. You can go to showmeinstitute.org/events, see all the details there. Again, mostschoolrankings.org, go check it out, and everyone stay safe out there. Thanks.
Thank you.